solve the problem that Nigel St. James created so that the monster my father's bride has been feeding can be slayed and presented at the feet of the five families, gift wrapped and tied with a bow. This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, Operation Anteater, bonus episode 3, part 2. When we left off, Natalia had played the recording of Sincere's confession at the round table. When she was done, she airdropped a copy to Javier and headed out, directly into the arms of her man. And while he comforted her, her father tried to kill Sincere. Big Nate had heard that his daughters had allowed Sincere to walk himself into a trap and that he'd hung himself. But he had no idea that Sincere had attempted to drug his daughter so that he could take advantage of her, or that he played in his oldest daughter's face in order to get himself in a position where he could do that. And everybody at the round table had somehow managed to remain calm. They'd questioned Natalia and Catherine like the consummate professionals they were, while he'd sat there trying to figure out which one of the many ways he knew to kill a man he'd use to kill Sincere, and who all he'd have to go through to get to him. Imagine his surprise when he jumped up and not a person in that room stopped him. He was choking Sincere out without interruption when Catherine said, "We have one more person who needs to provide a debrief so that we can have a full picture, Big Nate." And hearing that, and assuming that she was referring to Saint, Nate dropped Sincere back on his feet. Well, almost. When Sincere's feet touched the ground, his body followed, because that man's brain was without oxygen for almost long enough to lose consciousness. Sincere was gagging, coughing, clutching his throat, and hot as fish grease. But all he could do was fight for air. Big Nate reclaimed his seat, and the soldiers positioned to guard Sincere collected him off the floor and plopped him down back in his chair. Catherine touched the intercom button and said, "Send her in." And everyone was shocked, confused, and completely thrown off when Saint's longtime best friend Summer entered the room. When she was done sharing what Sincere had done to her when she was a teenager, the entire room was silent and disgusted. And somehow Sincere saw that as the appropriate time to speak. He actually tried to challenge Summer's version of events. He asked, "If you wasn't a willing participant, then why you ain't say nothing to nobody till now? What you think, my brother gonna come home and pick you? Finally? Stop embarrassing yourself. You wanted me. I know it, you know it, and before he could finish, the door flew open and almost came off the damn hinges. The night before, the conversation between Natalia and Saint had absolutely prepared Saint for Natalia's testimony. They'd created a game plan together, and it had gone off without a hitch. But there was absolutely nothing on this side of creation that could have possibly prepared Saint to see on the flat screen TV on the wall in the room where he was waiting with Natalia the face of his best friend as she walked into that meeting room, or to hear her recount the abuse she suffered at the hands of his brother. He had honestly had no clue, and it rocked him to his core. Natalia had asked him to pray, and he had, and God had spoken, and now the devil was on his shoulder, and he came through that door like a wrecking ball, flew across the room, and hit Sincere with 3 haymakers. Before Sincere could even slide his chair back, Sincere fell out of his chair like a sack of potatoes. Then Saint headed back across the room, grabbed Summer out of her chair, and wrapped her in his arms while saying, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He pulled her out of the room, took her into the room where Natalia was, and held both of them while they all cried. When he was able to comport himself, he returned to the round table. He looked around the room and saw that there was an empty seat, and his brother was no longer on the floor next to it. While he was gone, the room had turned into mayhem, and Q had regained order by saying, "Everybody calm down. I think that it's best that we get Sincere the hell out of here. There are only so many assaults that we can allow at the table." As the 3 men picked an unconscious Sincere up off the floor, Manny said, "I want Lopez soldiers on him. Take him to the dungeon." When the order was followed, Catherine said, "Now that everything is on the table, I think Sincere's fate should be in his brother's hands." And Saint entered the room saying, "Every single person who had a hand and putting my woman in danger is gonna have to see me. I don't care if they a soldier, a lieutenant." Then he looked at Ezra while saying, "A general." He looked at Javier while saying, "A right hand." And then he looked at Idra, the queen mother, and Q, and said, "Or a head." He looked at Manny and said, "I don't care how long or how well you knew my father." He looked at Catherine and said, or how many years you spent married to him. Then he pointed his finger in Catherine's face while saying, "Didn't I tell you that if you put me in a position like this, I would start revealing your secrets?" And before he could elaborate, you cut in saying, "Hold on, little cuz. For the record, me and mine," while pointing at his wife, LJ, and Big Wood, ain't have nothing to do with nothing. So when you go on your Guess Who's Back tour, leave us out of it. Now have a seat. There are some decisions that need to be made, and it looks like you the one who gonna have to make them. Saint said, "I'd rather stand. I won't be here long." When Catherine went to speak again, Saint said, "If you know what's best for you, you'll stop talking to me." And Manny said, "Now, nephew, you can be angry, but don't be disrespectful." Saint said, "My respect has not been earned, not by her or anybody else in this room, with the exception of Big Nate. Why would I respect any of you when you all were prepared to crown a predator twice?" Q said, "That's just it. We aren't. We weren't before Natalia and Summer appeared at this round table. We didn't know everything, but your brother's fate was sealed when you got arrested in Paris." Saint said, "Then why the hell did y'all let things go this far?" And he said, "Because it's one thing to take a man's job. It's a whole nother to take that man's life." Saint asked, "Why wasn't the plan to detain Sincere when he laced Natalia's drink? Why let it get physical? Why humiliate Summer by bringing her here?" And then everybody looked at Catherine, and when she didn't respond, Saint asked, "Who other than her was in on this?" When no one responded, Saint looked at Catherine and said, "You better make this good." Catherine said, "I did not orchestrate anything that your brother did. I just didn't stop him from being who he is. And I made sure that Natalia had all the security a townhouse could hold. I planted a covert in Sincere's circle to keep an eye on him and keep him from getting away with whatever he planned. But I needed to catch him in the act. I needed proof. I couldn't come to the round table with allegations. It couldn't be my word against his." Saint said, "Knowing he had a plan was enough. Why don't you go ahead and tell the truth?" Weren't trying to counter hearsay with proof. It was about me. When Catherine was silent, Saint said, "I will not do your dirty work." Catherine said, "Think about your sisters. All of the women he's hurt. The future of the St. James organization." Then everyone around the room realized that the trap was never intended to just ensnare Sincere. It was intended to catch Saint. Saint said, "You want me to exonerate you, to make all you've done worth it. You want me to accept my brother's seat at the table in exchange for his life. You are one conniving." And before the expletive could leave his mouth, Saint caught himself and smiled. Then he said, "You're the same snake who likes to hiss the words if you want someone else to pull the trigger." Then he just stared at Catherine until she finished her own analogy. She said, "You have to at least be the one to load the clip." Saint said, "And I told you when I met you that I don't shoot guns, that I don't load myself." Then he looked around the room and said, "My hand will not be forced. I don't care what you do to my brother. I won't spare his life by agreeing to take his seat at the table. I will not get married before I'm ready to a woman who isn't ready. I won't solve the problem that Nigel St. James created by killing my own brother so that the monster my father's bride has been feeding can be slayed and presented at the feet of the five families, gift wrapped and tied with a bow, so that none of you will have the St. James heirs' blood on your hands. I've studied the tenets of the five families. Sounds like you all have a conflict of interest on your hands. You can't kill him, and you can't let him live. And I'm not the one who's gonna make it easier for you. As a matter of fact, I'm about to make it harder. I will not take my brother's seat at the table if he is not alive when his son is born. I had my little sister called Janelle last night, and I found out that she's due in a matter of days, not weeks. You'll also be in need of another contender for head of the St. James family if Ronald Hobbs continues working as an attorney for the five families. I promised my cellmate that Ron would no longer have a job with the families if the families expected me to continue working for it." The Queen Mother asked, "Why?" And Saint said, "Because Ron was assigned as my cellmate's attorney and I had to demand that he be replaced because he propositioned my cellmate. He offered him additional privileges and what his family was already promised in exchange for sexual favors. The Queen Mother looked at Catherine and asked, "Did you know about this?" Before she could respond, Saint said, "She's the one who assigned Ron to his case, and she's the one who replaced him." And then the Queen Mother said, "I was trying to turn over a new leaf." And then before anybody could stop her, she jumped up on the table, ran across it, and kicked Catherine in the face. The whole room, and everyone connected by secure video conference, had just learned that Ron was gay, that Catherine knew and had said nothing, and that Saint was taking no prisoners. And everyone watched as the Queen Mother rearranged Catherine's face. Catherine was good for a diabolical scheme and good with gunplay, but the Queen Mother was good with everything. They didn't call her the Queen Bee for nothing. Catherine did the best that she could to defend herself and ward off the blow after blow that the Queen Mother was sending toward her face. But the Queen Mother's hand skills were still hard to counter, even though she was in her 60s. When Catherine was a bloody mess and no longer moving, the Queen Mother walked back around the table, held out her hand, and Idra reached into his lapel, handed her a handkerchief. She wiped off her knuckles and walked out of the room. Idra stood up and walked out behind her while saying, "Not a word from any of you." Then Saint walked out behind them, and in the hall he said, "Aunt Bella." The Queen Mother spent around and said, "Don't even bother apologizing, Saint. The truth is always better than a lie. I'm not in the business of shooting the messenger, and I wouldn't have respected you telling me in private, because everybody in that room deserves to know just how low down and dirty Catherine is. My only concern is my baby right now. Welcome home, and I'm proud of you for taking a stand in there. You're absolutely right. Catherine was trying to force you to do her dirty work and ours." Then she caught Saint off guard. She hugged him, and it was the first maternal hug, other than from Summer's grandmother, Miss Miracle, that he'd had since before his mother died. Saint wasn't trying to hurt the Queen Mother or his cousin Anya, but he'd felt compelled to honor his word. He told Catherine that if she backed him into a corner, he would start revealing her secrets. And wherever she showed her behind, he was going to get her behind. And he did. Meanwhile, inside the meeting room, Cute suggested that the round table take a recess. Catherine needed medical attention. They all needed time to think about how best to handle the situation with Sincere, since Saint had laid out his terms, and he was their only option to replace Sincere as contender for head of the St. James family. It was agreed that they'd take Tuesday off and return on Wednesday. And Manny said, "You're all free to remain here, enjoy the amenities, or return to your respective homes, whichever is most convenient." And then the room cleared out. Before LJ could leave the room, though, he felt a huge hand on his shoulder. When he turned around, Big Nate asked, "You got something you want to talk to me about?" And LJ said, "No, sir. That was all smoke and mirrors." Big Nate nodded and walked away. Stephanie and True had left the room together. They both had their phones on D&D, and when they checked them, they saw that they had a group text from Anya that included Rennie. They also had a separate text from Rennie. They responded to the text messages, and an hour and a half later, all four of the women were meeting up for drinks and appetizers at Angela and Stephanie's estate, in one of the estate's sitting rooms. The women were laughing and talking like nothing had happened. Then Stephanie said, "So basically, we've all voluntarily gotten in this here handbasket and mutually agreed to use it as a method of transport to the wrong destination." And True and Rennie guffawed. When Anya questioned the analogy, Rennie said, "Girl, when you sent that text, not one of us questioned it." And True said while signing, "We were all with the ish and giggles, knowing full well that you're basically asking for us to teach you how to be the best hot girl a summer has ever seen." And when they finished laughing, Rennie signed, "So basically, none of us even attempted to talk you out of it. We just jumped into the handbasket with both feet, knowing full well it was taking us straight to hell." They all laughed hysterically again, and then Anya got it. She signed, "Oh, we're going to hell in a handbasket." And then she laughed right along with them. Then Stephanie said, "You ain't got no girlfriends who could give you this lesson?" When Anya told them that she really didn't, Rennie said, "Well, why you didn't have this revelation when the three of us were all single and ready to mingle? We'd have gotten to feel with you, sis." Anya asked, "Y'all not up for the challenge?" Stephanie said, "Oh, we up for it. Just because we retired, that does not mean that we've forgotten all that we learned. And in our defense, The whole world is already going to hell without us. Hell, we're the only reason why there is a handbasket. And Truth said, because we brought it with us. And they all dissolved into laughter until they cried. Truth said inside, listen, I'm all for it. Because truth be told, men are not expected to endure heartbreak more than once. Women are socialized to get drugged through the mud, forgive a nigga who ain't even sorry, take him back over and over again, while remaining faithful, I might add, and remain completely available to him until he decides that the pain he's put us through has changed us too much, and we're no longer the woman he met. And now he's ready to dump us. We're supposed to put up with side chicks, outside babies, and wait until they can't get it up anymore to decide that now they want to be married and faithful. Rennie said, wait a minute now, y'all trying to talk me out of getting married? Stephanie said, obviously we know men who aren't like that. We're just talking about the expectations that society has and how those expectations are different for men and women, generally speaking. Truth said, exactly. If we get our hearts broken and we decide that it's time out for relationships, the world calls us closed off, bitter. We're told that it's not every man's fault. We're encouraged to keep trying, to kiss every frog. Stephanie said, even the ones who have warts. Truth said, exactly. Stephanie said, but baby, a man could have given a girl candy in the 3rd grade, and she didn't appreciate the candy. And he can go around telling everybody who will listen why he will never, ever, ever give another woman candy again. And the world will say, and Truth said, I feel you, King. Choose you, King. And all of the women guffawed. Stephanie said, nobody even asked if perhaps he gave her chocolate and she was allergic. Truth said, or perhaps she was diabetic. Rennie said, or she was allergic to red dye. And you know they putting that in every damn thing. And another thing, they call us women sensitive. These niggas is tender as hell. The smallest things have them in their damn feelings. Stephanie said, and that's exactly why I advise you to stick and move. Truth said, I agree. If you're gonna play, make sure that the games are on your turf and your time. And once you get your fill, keep it moving, sis. Do not hang around at the playground too long. Folks always worried about women catching feelings, when initially we agreed to have an understanding. But the truth are, men are known to catch feelings too, especially when you really standing on business. So you got to find the sweet spot. Hang around too long and you're gonna have a stalker on your hands. Stephanie said, but cut out too soon and you might miss out on getting your mind blown. Cause there's a trial period where you gotta train a man how to do it how you like. Anya signed, I don't wanna be training no man. I need to find men who already know what they doing. And then the 3 musketeers guffawed. Rennie said, even the most experienced man is going to have a learning curve because he ain't never been with you before. And you got to know you so you can teach him how to please you. Truth said, and if you know what you like and how to walk or talk him through it, and he don't have it by the 3rd time, go on and cut your losses, sis. Stephanie said, and please, whatever you do, get the My Chart and still use condoms. Take your birth control faithfully. Because you don't want no oops babies. Keep it on the low. You do not want your ex-husband to get wind of it. Because if he ain't begging for you back now, he certainly will be when he sees you with someone else. Rennie said, ain't that the damn truth? They always want what they can't have. But the minute the relationship ends with you, they already got a new girlfriend. Or a boyfriend. Stephanie said, what? Rennie said, don't front like you don't know some of these niggas is out here pitch hitting. Then she turned to Anya and said, so you really not gonna tell us what happened with Ron? And then Anya gave them the summary. He was unfaithful, and he used her for his own professional gain. And Rennie asked, who was he cheating with? You know her? And Anya said, I have no idea. Then she told them she discovered Ron's infidelity via the app that was tracking their fitness challenge. And all 3 of the women were speechless. And Rennie said, wait a minute, that's all you know? And Anya said, that is all I needed to know. Rennie said, shit, you ain't at least verify whether it was a woman or a man? And True and Stephanie almost fell out of their chairs. They hadn't said a word to Rennie about what was revealed at the round table. And they found it hard to believe that Stax, who was present at the round table, would have shared it with Rennie. If he did, she would have brought it up to them before they got there. But Stephanie said, OMG, Rennie, why would you ask her that? And since Rennie had no clue that she was right on the money, she said, what? In this day and age, you have got to check the file. Because these niggas is moving foul. They swinging both ways, getting married and making babies to make it look like they like women, while all along they flaming. Anya signed, well, I never even considered that. And to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't even want to know. Especially not now. I've been working on my Megan knees, and I'm ready to get outside, like Cardi said. They all laughed, but Rennie wouldn't let it go. She said, well, you a better woman than me, sis. Because if I ever found out that Stacks was cheating on me, I would need the full 411. And I would for damn sure need to know whether it's a woman, a man, a trans, a dog, a cat. Stephanie cut her off because she needed her to be easy. She asked, have you at least been tested and cleared for all STIs? And Anya said, now that I did. River K was only 2 weeks old when I found out. And my very first stop was to see Maribel. I had a follow-up HIV test 6 months later, and I have another one scheduled for 6 months from now. Then True had to be the one to bring back up the elephant in the room. She asked, seriously though, how would y'all feel if you found out that your man cheated on you with a man? Because I think I would be insulted and highly disgusted. I don't care who loves or likes who. And I certainly don't care who people sleep with. But the mere idea of my man sleeping with me, enjoying all of this, and preferring the opposite team would do something to my self-esteem. Then Stephanie said how she would feel, and Rennie said how she would feel. And Anya said, if Ron was cheating on me with a man, I truly would not want to know. But if I found out, my only concern would be the same as it is now. That he be a father to our children, and that he not expose them to anyone that he wasn't serious about being committed to. And since he couldn't remain loyal to me, I highly doubt that he'll be able to remain loyal to anybody else. I would also prefer that our children not be exposed to that lifestyle at this young age. But if he's been keeping that a secret all of this time, a few more years shouldn't hurt. Hell, the man was trying to stay married to me. Idra had to threaten him to get him to agree to the divorce. So if he was messing with a man, I don't think he'd be ready to jump out of the closet anytime soon. And I certainly wouldn't be trying to drag him out of it. Then True moved the conversation back to giving Anya hot girl summer advice. She said, listen, condoms and birth control are not 100%. Accidents still happen. So if you find yourself in a situation where you got your eye on more than one fella, make sure you have a full menstrual cycle between taking down each one. Rennie said, I know that's right. Because if the worst were to happen, you'd at least want to know which one of them niggas' fetus you was deleting. And all of the women guffawed. Stephanie said, and if you're going to be juggling, sis, don't get caught slipping. I don't care if you are using ASL. Don't ever call one of them niggas by their actual names. Anya said, what? True said, now why you think all the men we know have a habit of coming up with cutesy names for the women in their lives? Rennie said, Bookie, Sunshine, Love. Anya signed, don't do my brothers. And True said, Lil Mama. And Stephanie said, don't do Big Wood. Rennie said, you know what? Stacks don't even have one of them little cutesy names for me. I guess I might be safe. And Anya signed, and I bet Big Wood thought he was safe. And then came Bosch. True signed, I should have never went there. Rennie said, don't beat yourself up. You ain't know Wood was alive. True said, that's not even the issue at this point. Stephanie said, do I need to reassign him? Is he causing a problem? True said, not for me. He's causing one for himself. He almost got his head blown off during that last assignment. And Big Wood ended up saving him. Anya signed, please tell me more. Or is that top secret? True said, let's just say he was too busy staring at me instead of watching his own six. Rennie said, and Wood is a better man than me, because I would have never. Stephanie said, and that's precisely why we keep you on the fringes. Because being able to separate the personal from business is paramount. Rennie said, hold up, I thought Bosch was with the singing chick. True said, I thought so too, but my homegirl Courtney told me she was just trying to throw LJ off. Rennie said, hold up, now why would she need to do that? True said, girl, all four of them was playing roles at brunch. As the conversation continued, Stephanie excused herself to the restroom. Inside, she quickly pulled out her phone and called the Queen Mother. When she didn't answer, she called Idra. When Idra answered, Stephanie asked, are you still with Queen B? When Idra said he was, Stephanie said, can you put me on speaker? When he did, Stephanie said, so True, Rennie, and I are over here with Anya. It's a long story, but nobody has spilled the beans. Anya did share the reason why her and Ron divorced. And Rennie, who knows nothing, just happened to ask how she would feel and if she would want to know if Ron was cheating with a man. She said she wouldn't want to know. I figured that would help the Queen Bee figure out whether to tell Anya anything or not. Idra said, it does, actually. Then Stephanie hung up and headed back out of the restroom. When she opened the door, Anya was standing there. At the same time, in the villa that Catherine was assigned over at the Lopez estate, she had come to receive medical attention. And she and Idra both confessed everything that they knew about Ron, when they knew it, and why they'd kept it to themselves. And after Stephanie's phone call, the Queen Mother looked at them both and said, I don't care what you thought you knew about my daughter. or about her personality. I don't care that you were right, that she wouldn't want to know. You should have told me. Looking at Catherine, she said, you shouldn't have gone behind her back and hired him. I thought you were my friend, my sister. Catherine said, you know how it goes. The business comes first. He was perfectly positioned for a role on the family's legal team. We had a vacancy and a very small window of time to get that vacancy filled with someone who was capable, who could learn the ropes quickly and would be loyal to the organization. I'd assumed that someone with family ties would be our absolute best bet. I was looking out for your son, for my stepsons, and I didn't know a darn thing about him being unfaithful or about his sexuality until I got the call from Saint's attorney. I confronted Ron. He told me it was a misunderstanding. The Queen Mother said, and you believed him. Catherine said, I wasn't sure. I was waiting for Saint to be released so I could discuss it with him. You know that I love you. I love your children. But this wasn't about love. It was about responsibility. And you know how seriously I take my responsibility. I don't get it right all the time. But if anybody knows me, you know that my intentions are always good. Clearly, I didn't go about everything the right way. But you know I'm old school. I came up in the old way when my father was the head of my family's organization. He schemed, plotted, manipulated, and moved the pieces around the board however he needed to get the best possible outcome for all parties involved. And when someone was dirty, he absolutely used whoever he had to bring whatever they were into out of the darkness and into the light. The Queen Mother said, and you were fully informed after Nigel died, and you were asked to support my son and teach your stepson that the five families were no longer doing business that way. We manipulate and scheme against our enemies. We don't do that internally anymore. Saint is going to make a fine leader. But not because you were right, because he stood up to you. Because he didn't accept your ultimatums. And he refused to do your dirty work. For that, he deserves a seat at the table. Catherine asked, and I don't? So what's next for me? You gonna throw away over 40 years of friendship? Sisterhood? The Queen Mother said, this crown sits heavy, but I'll never take it off. Like you said, it's not about love. It's about responsibility.
This responsibility, this crown sitting heavy. Don't play with me. You see it shine, you don't see what it takes from me. I stand tall, even when it weighs on me. This crown sitting heavy, but it's